Brendan O'Neill joins us now. He's chief political writer at Spiked Online. He's also author of the brilliant book, a number of brilliant books, After the Pogrom, 7th of October, Israel and the Crisis of Civilization. A very good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia. How you doing?
Lots I want to get through with you, but I must ask you about that breaking news in the last couple of hours that the first migrants who've arrived on their dinghies from Calais yesterday have been detained, detained with a view to this one-in, one-out deportation deal. How confident are you that any of them will actually end up heading back over the channel?
Not confident at all, really. And even if some do, it won't be that many. We know that. Everyone knows that. And, you know, the thing is, does this government expect some brownie points because it's done the bare minimum of detaining people who come here illegally? That's what countries are supposed to do. If you break through someone's borders without permission, illegally, breaking the law the minute you step into this country, you ought to be detained. That should have been what was happening for years. But of course, as we know, these people were brought in, they were put up in 4-star hotels, they were given bed and board. So the government is now doing the bare minimum by detaining some migrants. Yvette Cooper says some of them will be sent home within weeks. And you just know it's going to be a slow process. There's going to be human rights challenges. Not all of them will go back. Everyone knows that from the very beginning, and it's a really tragic situation.
I mean, again, the reaction from our audience over the last few weeks, ever since this has been announced, is just sort of people just rolling their eyes to all intents and purposes. Just no one believes any of this. And again, it is fascinating. And as one of our callers so far today, Jason, said, you know, that this is the Prime Minister, human rights lawyer who stopped the Rwanda deal. Donald Trump's going to be using that accommodation that we paid for in Rwanda to house some of his own deported migrants, but we won't. I know that Germany was looking at it as well. I mean, you know, it's actually painful, isn't it? But the reality is also, whoever is going to be chosen to come here, I mean, we're told that the French won't actually exchange any information, personal information about those migrants with the British. We're going to have to try and assess these people and bring them over. But they're all, again, we're told it's one in, one out. But the reality is that one we send back, if they do ever go back, is going to be able to just try again and just turn up again. And the one who does come here apparently as a legitimate asylum seeker is going to be able to bring their entire extended family, because that's what's always been allowed. And we still have the other 750 a week coming, even if all 50 do get detained a week. We're going to end up with more people in the end than we've got right now.
It's a crisis situation. It's an emergency situation. I couldn't believe it last week or the week before when the cabinet had a crisis emergency meeting about the war in Gaza. Now, of course, the war in Gaza is a crisis, but they should be discussing what's happening here. And the crisis at the moment is the crisis at our borders. We live under a government, under a regime that seems uninterested in the idea of sovereignty, uninterested in the idea of protecting our own borders. And that's the starting point of a democracy. That's the starting point of a sovereign nation, that you know who and what is crossing your borders. Just as you and I can't just go into Italy or some other country unless we've got our passport, unless we've got some form of permission.
Stood in a long queue while the EU people walk through quickly,
That's right. And if they want to throw us out for whatever reason because we break a law or we say something that they don't like, then that is their prerogative as an independent nation. We seem to have lost sight of that ourselves, and we're no longer doing it.
Now, we haven't lost sight of it. Our great leaders and our civil servants have lost sight of it, but no one is. I agree with you. I don't think they do understand the notion of a nation state of borders. They only recognised it when it was Ukraine. They recognised it when it's Palestine. They don't understand the concept of national sovereignty, autonomy, accountability here in this country. I mean, well, this is the Labour Party who thinks that the EU citizens should have been allowed to vote in the Brexit referendum, for goodness sake. But this makes a lot of sense when you find out this story. And it's an absurd story, but I think it epitomises everything that's wrong, that's going on at the heart of our government. And this is a bunch of civil servants working at the HM Revenue and Customs, so the taxman's office, basically holding a seminar on what's literally called, not even hiding it away, the guilt of being British. So on Wednesday, you could log in remotely, because of course they're all working from home, and this was during office hours, or you could actually attend in person. And this was an hour-long listening circle, whatever the hell that is, held from 11 a.m. until midday. And basically it was billed as I'm going to read this to you because I'm going to try not to laugh out loud. A powerful, interactive and reflective listening circle exploring the emotional complexity of being South Asian and British, covering topics including the emotional weight of colonial history as part of the taxman's commitment to diversity, equality, inclusion. I mean, the emotional complexity of being South Asian and British. Rishi Sunak was Chancellor. I think he didn't find it emotionally complex.
It's preposterous. And it's more than preposterous. It's actually quite gross to think that this culture of self-loathing, this kind of fashionable self-hatred now infests pretty much every institution, right through to the HMRC. You know, this institution has one job and one job only, which is to collect tax. That's it, full stop. And also answer people's phone calls. That would be
Who are
nice.
trying to pay tax. Who are trying to pay the correct amount of tax.
Yeah, that's right. If they weren't so busy doing these self-loathing courses online on Zoom, then they might be able to actually get their jobs done and talk to ordinary, hardworking Brits. It's really gross, actually, and it demonstrates that we are run by a layer of society that actually hates the country that they govern and feels ashamed of the country that they govern.
Well, the country that they're supposed to serve. The public they are supposed to serve. They despise and have contempt for us because we are not embarrassed and ashamed by our country's values, flag, history, or anything.
That's right. And it goes through all institutions. We know the civil service is just rife with this stuff. We know that the political class has that kind of fashionable disdain for British history. We know that Sadiq Khan wanted to take down certain statues or rename certain roads in London because they were named after dodgy people. We know the university system is overrun with this nonsense. This is we have a ruling class that hates the country that it rules over, and that is where all these problems start, right down to their inability to fix our communities, their inability to control the borders, their inability to give us a good life. Why would they, when they don't even like the country they're in charge of?
Well, indeed, and again, why would you want to control the borders? Because you don't want to protect British culture and British values in any way, because you have nothing but contempt for those things. It's funny that so many people from other parts of the world and other cultures want to come to our country. I wonder why they don't have contempt for our culture in the same way. Let's also talk about, I mean, again, small point, we're going to have a load of taxes going up in the autumn. Did anyone think anything different? But you'd think tax staff might be working on issues like that, which are going to affect real people. But let's also talk about an issue. I know it's very close to your heart, and you've written a book on this, and you've travelled to Israel many, many times, and you've interviewed so many people and talked about what happened on October the 7th and the aftermath, and you've been a stalwart in defending the right of Israel to do what is necessary to defend itself. What do you make of with the Guardian headline, leading global scholars, I mean the usual wokerati in academia, signing a letter urging the UK to end the ban on Palestine Action, which has been prescribed as a terrorist group? This, by the way, after today we've had another 3 people who've been charged with support for the prescribed terrorist group after a demonstration at the weekend. More demonstrations planned, and the Prime Minister apparently telling colleagues that we've had some cases of what Palestine Action has done which have been publicised, but actually their targeting of Jewish-owned businesses, particularly in the capital, there's a lot more that they've been doing that hasn't been publicised. What do you make of these academics thinking that this prescribed terrorist group is an organisation we should be allowed to cheer on?
You know, who the hell do they think they are, poking their noses into British affairs, an affair that has been pretty much settled by Parliament? This action has been taken in the democratic fashion, and I don't think it's any of their business, these global influencers.
I hadn't heard of most of them, to be fair.
And we don't even, you couldn't pick them out in a lineup, and they think they should have the right to tell us what should happen in this country. My view is that Palestine Action is a very sinister organisation. And what this organisation consists of, in the most part, are time-rich, largely quite plummy leftists and privately educated Stalinists who hate Israel with a real strange passion and bigotry that I think can only be described in terms of racism rather than politics. That's how I view it. And if you look at the action they took in Stamford Hill, which is a heavily Jewish part of London, where they did smash up a Jewish-owned business, they did throw paint on it. It hit some religious symbols, in fact, their paint. And they said the business had links with Israeli firms, but the business denies it. I'm old enough to remember when it was fascists who used to smash up Jewish businesses, when it was Nazis who used to reduce Jewish shops to broken glass. Now we have Palestine Action doing it supposedly in the name of anti-imperialism or anti-war. I'm not buying it. It's a gross organisation, and I don't want to hear from these global influencers about what we should do to it.
Hear to that. Brendan O'Neill, always good to get your thoughts. Appreciate that. Chief political writer at Spiked Online. Thank you for joining us. Benjamin Butterworth still with us. What do you make of this, the Palestine Action? I hadn't heard of them until the discussion came up about them being proscribed. Yet another organisation that claims they're all about the Palestinian people, claims they're all about, saving children in Gaza, but actually seem to just hate Israel and, let's be honest, hate Jews.
Yeah, and they hate Israel regardless of what happens in Gaza. That's just the excuse they're using.
They hated Israel before the IDF was going into Gaza.
Precisely. But the question about whether it should be prescribed, I think, is a slightly different one, because clearly it's causing real problems. If you have hundreds of people turning up on marches explicitly saying they support this
and
group,
you arrest every single one of them.
Well, you have to, but I mean, in reality, that's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to find the prison places if they're repeat offenders and deserve that. And it starts to become quite a problem for the police to maintain this law. And then
build more prisons. Well, I'm not sure you should necessarily go to prison for going on a march supporting someone. I think I'm not entirely sure that would be as far as I would go.
But the other point I'd make about prescription is that usually it's something we use for international terrorist organisations like the Taliban or ISIS. And so you prescribe them because that means you cut them off from the funding and the infrastructure in order to carry out the activities. You can't replicate ISIS as one bloke in your bedroom, right? And so doing this for a domestic organisation, well, there's nothing to stop the same group of people with the same goals setting up a new group with a new name and behaving the same way.
And they do that. Yes, and then they should be prescribed as well.
Indeed,
but you can't.
I
But
think
it's the idea that you can't.
Farcical.
Yes, well, it does. Yeah, but again, the People's Front of Judea, kind of Judean People's Front kind of territory. But at the end of the day, you can't have organisations that are going around, committing criminal acts of terror against certainly particular members of an ethnic or religious minority in this country, and justifying it, and people openly supporting it on the streets, and everyone saying that's fine. What should you do other than say you can't go around supporting an organisation that does that?
I mean, I agree that their behaviour is monstrous, and I think Brendan O'Neill put it perfectly, saying it's understood better in racism than in politics. I think that's a very good assessment. The point I'm making is that it causes quite practical challenges, and if the police can't manage the scale of it, then it starts to undermine the legitimacy not of that law but of other prescribed groups.
Well, exactly. Yeah, but again, the police can't even manage to police the supposedly pro-Palestine marches, which I think have become hate marches. They're organised by groups with close links with Hamas and other terrorist organisations. And anyone who's still on those marches, I'm sorry, sorry, I don't think you care one whit about a child who may or may not be suffering from hunger in Gaza right now. I think you just hate Jewish people, and I'm as simple as that. And I just think we need to call it what it is. I really do.